Okay, so this is part 2. If you have not seen part 1, I'm going to leave a link up so you can go ahead and watch it, but I most definitely suggest you watch it before you dive into this. This is definitely the continuation. So, alrighty, here we go, diving back in. Smithsonian. And it comes with a board of trustees. Humps. So what I was able to find on the Smithsonian and its current itineration, man, listen to this. It has 9 research centers, a castle, 19 museums, its own television channel, their own magazine, libraries, gift stores, bookstores, laboratories, observatories. They even have an herbarium housing more than 4.5 million plant species, okay? They have Facebook, Flickr, YouTube. They have their own written publications and online publications. They have their own channel on most cable outlets. They're literally funded by the government. And from what I was able to show you guys, they have congressional politicians on their board of regents. They have their own air and space museum. Yes, it even contains the Columbia model for Apollo 11 mission. Bro, they even have their own record label, the Smithsonian Folkways Records. Hopefully I just put into perspective how vast of an institution this is, and I'm literally really not even touching the surface of the amount of archaeological, ancient, antique, historical documents and artifacts they have in their personal collections. Man. Brief intermission to discuss something notable for 1845. So, 1 year before the creation of the Smithsonian in 1846, we now have this manifest destiny. Yes, the manifest destiny. The manifest destiny, right? Remember that from school? The manifest destiny was basically the idea of the United States being destined by God. Okay? Destined by God to expand dominion and spread democracy and capitalism across the entire North American continent. This is the manifest destiny passed in 1845, right before the creation of the Smithsonian in 1846. Just want to lay that out there. So, in layman's terms, just to be clear, it's a decree that the new European settlers of this land now have the God-given right to literally go from east to west of this North American continent, doing whatever they wanted to do, i.e. to make it into their own personal image, regardless of the people living there. Yup, that's what I got out of it. Yeah, they really believed that they were, quote unquote, taming the wilderness and civilizing the West to remake it in the image of the 13 colonies? Bro, that's crazy. But yeah, that's the manifest destiny in 1845. Right again before 1846, the creation of the Smithsonian Scientific Institute Research Center and Museum / on the hush hush low low trust. Okay, now that I've gotten that out of my system, let's talk about the Bureau, or rather the Bureau of American Ethnology. Okay, well, what is ethnology? Ethnology is the study of the characteristics of various people and the differences and relationships between them. It's usually closely interwoven with anthropology. Interesting. Well, this was a bureau that was created in 1879. Another great act passed by Congress. The purpose, though, according to the narrative and Wikipedia, was for Congress to transfer all their archives and records and materials relating to the Indians of North America from the Interior Department to the Smithsonian Institution. Alright, we're gonna let them go as well and get back to the Smithsonian directly, because now, again, here we are. It's 1846 and we have the establishment of the Smithsonian. So around this time, of course, over the course of a few years, in lieu of a lot of the killing and what they would call land acquisition towards the west of America, we have the invasion of the Ohio and Mississippi valleys, or what the Europeans would call it, discovery. Lots of discoveries, a never-ending supply of what they would say were abandoned earthworks, or what's known today as mounds. And initially, upon discovery, the same mounds were attributed to a sophisticated race of long-vanished builders. Alright, now let's talk about the racial climate of society at this time. Can't forget about eugenics popping up and eugenicists running everywhere. We have evolution and evolutionists running everywhere. We have a westward expansion of just downright killing and slaughtering people. And now they have a God-given right to do so by their own paperwork of their own hands, of the manifest destiny, with a lot of the same views held across the nation and being promoted as science. Calling the people native of the land barbarians to justify the meaningless slaughter and the downright dirty just taking of their land. Wow. Okay. So, with all these years of killing, slaughtering, and the Trail of Tears, aka the Indian Removal Act that started in 1830, I guess after disenfranchising and removing so many people, they began to unearth a lot of archaeological finds, according to their narrative. What I think, it sounds like they just stole a bunch of things that they found in the area they evacuated people from and discredited the same people that they kicked out. But hey, don't quote me. I'm not saying it's true or anything. I'm just saying that's just what it looks like from here. In 1844, Joseph Henry became the government's first science advisor, and he chastised Congress, quote, for meddling in scientific matters they didn't understand, end quote. He was pretty radical. Check this out. And at a meeting held by the National Institute Promotion of Science based in DC, he made a remark stating, quote, he did not like the plan of uniting science and party politics, end quote. And then he turned around to call the organization a host of pseudo-savants. Later in life, he expressed concern that the Smithsonian, once he no longer was in charge, it may fall as the Agriculture Department and the Patent Office has done under political sway, and the director be changed with every change of administration. Some pretty interesting views there for someone that worked there in the 1800s. Alright, so 2 years later, after the creation of the Smithsonian in 1848, the Smithsonian created its first published book, Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley. Alright, so what's interesting about this very first book of the Smithsonian is, in this book, they concluded that the builders could not have been the ancestors of the supposedly savage Native American groups that still live in the regions today. Interesting, that's the first publication. Literally giving no credibility to the people that were here before they got here, about the works that were here before they got here as well. All very interesting, right? Well, what's even more interesting is a lot of this information was hard for me to find between 1850 and 1879 as far as the Smithsonian and what they were able to collect over that particular time. But the Smithsonian history does pick back up again in 1879 in a direct duality with the Bureau of Ethnology, now headed with J.W. Powell as the director. So let's talk about 1863. Okay, so in this year, The National Institute of Science, as well as the National Academy of Science, were founded in this year as an extension by Congress of the Smithsonian Institution for the united purpose to investigate, examine, experiment, and report upon any subject of science or art when called upon by the government. And now we go back to Joseph Henry, the radical. He too was the first secretary of the NIS. And from what we were able to see, he was not happy with the direction of where he saw the Smithsonian going, right? So it's said that he was opposed to relying on the government for funding postulating, and that the Academy could not rely on federal appropriations, and that accepting government money to support its work might compromise its scientific objectivity. Makes sense. He also goes on to say its existence should in no wise depend on the fitful appropriations of Congress, which would not fail to be defeated by the adverse report to some favored project of an influential member. That sounds familiar. But yes, that's what he did not want. And yes, that's exactly what goes on today with the Smithsonian. But that's not what he wanted, according to the narrative. Another keynote of 1863 is apparently there were nearly daily findings being reported in newspapers of giant skeletons and technological artifacts, just to sit that out there. So now it's 1879, and the Smithsonian has been collecting and in charge of these archaeological findings for about 33 years now. And now we have the introduction formally of J.W. Powell. So this new director, J.W. Powell, and this is the introduction of his report by the Bureau of Ethnology to the Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution. Now, this particular document sets forth how archaeological data can be used, okay? This report, hey, it's from the Bureau of Ethnology, and they're like, hey, Smithsonian Institution, this is how all of your archaeological data can be used, okay? This is the report. The official report. And what's crazy is in this report, he states that if the archaeological data is pictographic in nature and older than Columbus, then the evidence should be discarded. What? Yes. So I just think it's really interesting to take note of his general attitude towards the natives or indigenous people of the land in his article to the Secretary of the Smithsonian Institute. And yes, this is 1879. And before I just get into some of the key parts I would like to focus on a little bit, I'm going to leave up a link for the PDF because this report is pretty wild, man. Alright, so basically this guy starts off on the wrong foot, okay? So here we go. Here's an interesting statement. The monuments of antiquity you found throughout North America and camp and village site, grave mounds, ruins, and scattered works of art, the origin of development of art, and savage and barbaric life may be satisfactorily studied incidentally. To hints of customs may be discovered, but outside of this, the discoveries made have been illegitimately used, especially for the purpose of connecting the tribes of North America with the peoples or so-called races of antiquity and other portions of the world. Now that was a mouthful right there. I feel like he's literally telling us how he feels. But wait, there's more. He then goes on to say that the mounds that were discovered were too far apart that there was no need or reason for us to search for an extra limited origin through lost tribes for the arts discovered in the mounds of North America. No need, no reason. He puts it down, man, and then he picks it back up to say, hence it will be seen that it is illegitimate to use any picture, graphic matter of a date anterior to the discovery of the continent by Columbus. And this wraps up part 2 of MYTHSONIAN, How to Hide History and Get Away with It. Hopefully I was able to give a little more insight into who this company is, or just at least a little bit of insight about just the company itself. Either way, I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, like it, share it, and subscribe. Oh yeah, and namaste lit.